Have you ever looked at a plant's complicated Latin name and just wondered, where in the world did that come from? Well, it's definitely not random. It's actually a story that's been unfolding for centuries, a huge scientific quest to bring order to the chaos of the natural world. So today, we're going to trace that journey, from a simple ladder to the massive, complex tree of life we know today. So it all starts with a simple question: why is naming plants so dang hard in the first place? Well, the sheer number of them, the diversity, is just mind-boggling. And if we want to study them, or conserve them, or even just talk about them with scientists on the other side of the world, we need one universal system that works for everybody. And for hundreds of years, that's been the great puzzle for botanists. And really, that whole puzzle boils down to this one massive shift in how we see the world. For the longest time, we pictured nature as a simple ladder of life. A straight line from low to high. But what we know now is that it's nothing like that. It's much more like a gigantic, messy, beautiful branching tree, full of twists and turns and complicated relationships. And that one change in perspective, it changed absolutely everything. So here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll dive into that old ladder idea. Then we'll meet the guy who came along and shook everything up, Carl Linnaeus. After that, we'll follow the quest to find natural groupings, get into the real detective work that anchors every single plant name, and finally bring it all home with how DNA is building the family tree of today. Okay, so let's jump right in at the beginning. Our first stabs at trying to organize nature were based on an idea that feels really intuitive, but as we're about to see, was also fundamentally flawed. People called it the scalae naturae, which is just Latin for ladder of life. This idea, which Aristotle made famous, was basically that everything in the universe had a rank in this great chain of being. You've got rocks and minerals at the bottom, then you move up to plants, then simple animals, and you guessed it, humans right at the very top. It was clean, it was orderly, and for literally thousands of years, this wasn't just a theory, it was accepted as the truth. But here's the thing. That whole ladder idea, it's just plain wrong. And the big problem is that it leads to these huge misunderstandings. For instance, on the ladder, you'd think a fish is way closer to a mollusk, like a clam, than it is to a human. But nope, we now know that fish actually share a more recent common ancestor with us than they do with mollusks. Evolution doesn't climb a ladder, it branches out like a tree. So you've got this ancient model falling apart, and honestly, the world of botany was kind of a mess. And into this chaos walks our first real game changer, a Swedish botanist named Carl Linnaeus, who decided it was time to bring some serious order to the plant kingdom. So get this. Back in 1732, on a shoestring budget, Linnaeus goes on this epic 5-month trek through Lapland, just cataloging plants. And that single expedition laid the groundwork for his entire life's mission. Fast forward 2 decades, and he publishes Species Plantarum, a book that literally changed botany forever. In it, he laid out his famous sexual system, a pretty radical idea that grouped plants based on their reproductive parts. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. Linnaeus himself knew his system was artificial. He wasn't trying to map out the grand tree of life. He picked those few features because they were easy to see and practical. He was creating a tool, a simple filing system. Think of it like a library's card catalog. It's not about the deep meaning of the books, it's just about helping you find the book you need. And at that, it was an absolute game changer. So Linnaeus hands the world this incredible tool. But you know how science works, right? The next generation of scientists looked at it and said, okay, this is great for organizing, but what are the real relationships here? They wanted to find the natural order of things. And that sparked what's now called the period of natural systems. You had these brilliant botanists, like the de Jussieu family over in Paris, and they started looking at the whole shebang. Not just one or two parts, but everything about the plant. Its leaves, its stem, its seeds, its flowers. The idea was that if you looked at all the evidence together, a plant's true family identity would emerge. But of course, it wasn't that easy. They hit a massive roadblock called convergence. This is when two totally unrelated plants end up looking almost identical because they live in similar environments. The classic example is a cactus from the Americas and a euphorbia from Africa. They both look spiny and fleshy, right? But they're not closely related at all. It's like nature's version of a disguise, and it made figuring out the true family tree an absolute nightmare. Okay, so with all this confusion, is it related? Is it just a look-alike? Scientists realized they needed an anchor. A single, unchanging reference point that could lock a name to a specific plant no matter what. And this is where things get really cool, almost like a detective story. The solution was as brilliant as it was simple. It's called the type concept. And the rule is this: every single plant name has to be physically tied to one specific preserved plant. That's it. This type specimen is the ultimate authority. It basically ends all arguments. Someone asks, "What do you mean by this species?" You can literally point to the specimen and say, "I mean this plant, right here." And check this out. This is a real one, collected by a botanist named Eric Ekman. So when the species Gonolobus ekmanii got its name, that name was permanently bolted to this physical plant sitting in a collection. From that day forward, if any other botanist anywhere in the world thinks they found that same species, they have to come back and compare their plant to this one. This is the standard. So you're probably thinking, okay, I get it, but why is this such a big deal? Why does one old dried plant matter so much? Well, it comes down to two huge reasons. First, the practical one. It's the gold standard for comparison. There's no ambiguity, no arguing about it. It's the physical proof. And second, for the whole naming system, the fancy word is nomenclature, it provides stability. It stops the names from becoming a chaotic mess where nobody knows what anyone else is talking about. And the guy we really have to thank for this is an American botanist, N.L. Britton. The idea had been floating around, but he's the one who really championed it. At a big meeting way back in 1892, he basically stood up and said, "We need to make this a hard and fast rule." And they did. That one decision brought a level of stability that the field desperately needed. So all of this history, moving from that simple ladder to a complex tree, searching for natural groups, anchoring names to physical plants, it all sets the stage for right now. And it turns out that type specimen, that physical anchor, was holding a secret that nobody back then could have even dreamed of. It's DNA. Now, with DNA, we can build these incredible, super detailed family trees. But guess what? We run into that same old trap. It is so tempting to look at a tree diagram and read it left to right, thinking less evolved on the left, more evolved on the right. But that's just ladder thinking in disguise. The only way to read it correctly is to trace the branches back. You're looking for the most recent fork in the road, the most recent common ancestor. That's what tells you who's truly related to whom. And what scientists are looking for, the absolute gold standard today, are things called monophyletic groups. It sounds complicated, but it's not. Imagine a big tree. A monophyletic group is one complete branch. You grab it where it meets a bigger branch, and you get that branch and every single twig and leaf that grows from it. That's it. An ancestor and all of its descendants. Finding and naming those complete natural branches, that's the whole game now. And this isn't just one person in a lab anymore. This work is now led by this huge worldwide team called the Angiosperm Phylogeny Group, the APG. They pull in DNA data from scientists everywhere to build one gigantic unified family tree for all flowering plants. And it's amazing. Questions that botanists argued about for centuries are now being settled, sometimes overnight, because the DNA tells the true story, revealing connections we could have never seen before. Which brings us to a final thought. We've gone from this simple little ladder to this incredibly complex, DNA-driven tree of life. But science is never finished. Our ability to read DNA is getting crazier and more powerful every single year. So it makes you wonder, right? Is the tree we have today going to look totally different in 50 years? What other secrets are hiding in those branches, just waiting to be discovered?